Hey guys, we're basically CIVL 498, and we did life cycle assessment. And through this presentation, we'll talk about how we approach life cycle building systems through life cycle assessment. But before that, it's probably a good idea to explain what exactly life cycle assessment is. And a definition is that it's a study of the environmental performance of a product and services over their lifetime. Before we really get into this, there's a few questions I have that I just want you guys to think about, and basically the types of questions are related to the environment and products that we use every day. For example, paper or plastic bags. What is better for the environment? Buying an electric car, is that really more sustainable than a normal fossil fuel burning car? How about recycling? Is that the best way to dispose of waste? And finally, is that green claim actually true? Paper versus plastic bags. That kind of depends on the use. In plastic bags, we see that people tend to use them more. They reuse the plastic bags for garbage or other uses. Paper bags just disposed of. And a lot of studies have been conducted and shown that plastic bags can be 10 times as environmentally friendly than paper bags. Paper bags tend to use up a lot of resources, a lot of energy, a lot of water goes into producing, manufacturing paper bags. And plastic bags are generally cheaper to manufacture, easier to manufacture. And paper bags decompose and they release 20 times more climate impact than just burning paper. Plastic bags act as a carbon sink, and so they don't really emit as much impact. In terms of something like an electric car, that kind of depends on the regional context. Depends on where the car is and how you're using it. So, for example, in British Columbia, we mainly use hydroelectricity through dams, and generally, relatively, that's better than burning coal to produce energy. So when we're using that power to charge up an electric car, we have to include it into the kind of impacts that are involved, and that can be lower than a normal fossil fuel burning car. But if we go anywhere else where they're burning coal to produce energy, electrical energy, then there's a lot of problems there because they're replacing fossil fuel with coal, and that can create more problems. And in a lot of cases, it's been found that electric cars are not as good as fossil fuel burning cars. Finally, let's talk about recycling. In terms of recycling, that really depends on the proximity to services for the recycling plant. So if there's a waste and the recycling plant is very far away from the waste, then you have to be able to transport it through trucks. And there's a lot of costs associated with that. You know, you're consuming a lot of fossil fuel and you're emitting a lot of CO2 in that process. So any sort of benefit you get from recycling is overcome by the negative impacts of burning fossil fuel, emitting CO2. So if the recycling station is far away, there's no real point of recycling. The point we're trying to make by asking all these questions is that the answer is more complicated than it appears. Paper bags, electric cars, recycling, they all seem like they're the best option, but we really can't say for sure. There are also many environmental costs of a product or system that most people don't really think about. And these issues have to be communicated. For transparency purposes, and if you want to compare products, there needs to be a structure in place. And that's where LCA comes in. It's a structured approach to this problem, and it's a good base for the discourse. It incorporates all the data, all the assumptions and certainties, and it's a very transparent process. And really, it's structures and dependencies. And through this presentation, we hope to really communicate this. So I'm going to move on to Andrew, who's going to explain life cycle assessment.
Life cycle assessment is a method. It's a method to structure a study, and we communicate the study through reports. Let's take, for example, the life cycle of a t-shirt. Each process in its life cycle has different inputs and outputs. Have you ever thought of the life cycle of the t-shirt you're wearing right now? First, we have the raw material supply, say a cotton farm in North America. It's transported across the Pacific Ocean to China, where it's manufactured into a t-shirt. Transported back over the ocean to the stores where we buy it. We wear it, we wash it, we wear it some more, and finally it's transported into its resting place. So what LCA does is it provides a structure for this kind of life cycle. What we do is we define a boundary around the unit processes around the life cycle of a t-shirt. And we evaluate it based on the inputs in terms of energy and raw materials, and the outputs in terms of air, water, and land emissions. So in this presentation, now that you know a little bit about a general idea of life cycle assessment, or LCA, we'll talk about how we use LCA in our class, the results of our studies, and the future of LCA. Now I'll pass it on to Don to talk about what we did in our class.
Thank you, Andrew. So right now I'm going to be introducing to you how we as a class use LCA to learn. And what we did is we took on various projects and we wanted to analyze the impacts they had of different structures in Vancouver. We took a look at 3 types of structures, and they were academic buildings, residential buildings, and also viaducts. We're also going to take a look at the purpose of these projects and look a little bit into the detail and extent of our work. We'll also take a moment to delve into the inventory analysis and take a look at the process of our methodology. We'll also take a moment to also look at the impact assessments that we did do and look at the outputs that came from that. We'll also be showing you a little bit of what we did with this information. So we'll just go straight into it. We have our academic buildings here. And for our project, we took a look at 4 different buildings on the UBC campus. They were the UBC Law Building, Allard Hall, the Earth Ocean Science Building, the Sears Building, which is the Center for Interactive Research on Sustainability, and also the UBC Pharmacy Building. 2 of these buildings have already been completed, the Law Building and the Sears Building, and the 2 others are very well on their way. That being said, these are very new projects, and they all have very, very impressive architectural features and designs. And on top of that, all of them are claimed to, or at least have already done so, have a very high standard of LEED certification. So right off the bat, we have really big claims to sustainability. And what we would like to do with our projects here on these buildings is confirm that. We would like to bring numbers to these projects and confirm that this is actually the case. The next set of projects we looked at were residential buildings, and they are the ones located here on the UBC south side of campus. These buildings may not be as impressive or maybe as grand as academic buildings, but they are at a much larger scale. And as you can see up above, they have extensive use of glazing, which is something of interest to us. These buildings have been codenamed the B, I, and We buildings. For privacy reasons, we can't say which ones they are exactly, but that's not the point. What we want to get around is, what are the overall impact assessments of these buildings? And as previously mentioned as well, the glazing ratio is an important aspect for us. And what that is the ratio of window in the building to walls. And this is important to UBC because there are claims that say that the more glazing there is in a building, the more sustainable the building is. And what we would like to do is go into that and find out if that is the case. We would like to bring numbers to that, of course, as usual, and find out if this is actually the case. This is useful for UBC, as for UBC building developers, they can then go on to the future and have more informed decisions on what to do for future projects. The third type of structure we looked at were viaducts, and more specifically, the Georgia and Dunsmuir Viaducts. As you can see up above, these are the structures that connect the East Town, Vancouver, to the downtown core. These have been in operation for about 40 years now and have been providing a great service to Vancouver. Except the time has now come to either demolish or retrofit these structures. And a lot of discussion has been going on in the city about what to do next. Everyone wants to know what is the next step that Vancouver should take. With our life cycle assessment projects, we would first like to make a baseline that we can use for other transportation infrastructure in Vancouver, so that we may be able to compare them in the future. On top of that, our project explores many of the options that Vancouver is considering. And from that, Vancouver soon has to make a decision on what to do next. And we would like to be able to confirm that the decision they make is what is the most sustainable one. So what do all these projects have in common? What they do have is the common goal of, as I've said numerous times, wanting to confirm claims of sustainability. We want to put numbers to these figures so that we actually know what's going on. And from all of this, we would like to also add this to the UBC LCA database. And once that database is be able to get bigger and be able to be more reliable, we would like to use that to compare buildings in the future. And this is essential for LCA because this will be able to develop the LCA in North America, and it will be able to be used more widely.